All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's event. I'm Callista, and I'm part of the design and hackathon team here at UniMelb's Google Developer Student Club. And we'll be starting shortly in around 3 minutes. There's a poll EV link that will be posted in the chat down below. So feel free to ask your questions and vote for the ones you want the answers of most. I'll be playing the Google Year in Search 2020 video just before we start.
The most human trait is to want to know why. And in a year that tested everyone around the world, why was searched more than ever.
The spread of the coronavirus has passed a significant milestone.
And while we didn't find all the answers, we kept asking. Some questions inspired joy, others excitement.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I don't know what an improper fraction is.
Teacher should make $1 billion.
We found politician, y'all.
Put it on there and start it up for me.
What are y'all doing? It's still March. How many days in March?
Some questions made us cry.
You know, we've been through our ups and been through our downs. I think the most important part is that we all stay together throughout. I love you guys.
Some made us worry about this spinning rock we call home.
Fires were detected in the Amazon rainforest.
Why were so many lives lost?
Almost 1.5 million people have now died of COVID-19 worldwide.
Why are we still asking the same questions?
George Floyd repeatedly told the officers that he could not breathe.
So why do we still have strength to continue?
I believe in your power. I believe in our power.
Chants of Black Lives Matter echoed from thousands of protesters in cities around the world.
Why are we not defeated?
We have made too much progress, and we are not going back. We are going forward.
Planes are starting to arrive in Beirut full of international aid.
Firefighters from around the world arriving in California. There are over 100 coronavirus vaccines in development worldwide.
This is one of those times when people look out for one another and have each other's backs.
We kept going for those who showed us the way.
Think about how you would like the world to be for your daughters and granddaughters.
Remember, the struggles along the way are only meant to shape you for your purpose. Press on with pride and press on with purpose.
Why is it that this year showed its worst, and we still found ways to triumph?
An incredible feat from my Gabriel.
Naomi Osaka, U.S. Open Championship.
Can't let Corona stop you. Can't let quarantine stop you.
So until we get to every answer,
We can get it together somehow.
we're still searching.
All right. Okay. Not gonna lie, I got a little teary the first time I watched the video. 2020 has been a really interesting and challenging year for most of us. All right, so just another reminder to ask your questions in the poll EV that has been set up. The link is in the chat, so just look there and you'll be able to ask your questions. So welcome everyone to the second Ideate Tech Talk of the year. Today we have amazing panelists for today. We have Jackson, Yakub, Alice, and joining us here today. And we'll be hearing from them and we'll be learning exactly how to land a job at Google. So it's my greatest privilege to introduce the first panelist. We have Jackson. He's a talent and outreach program specialist here at Google. And he's been in 4 different teams throughout his 4-year career with Google. His main role as of now is to connect, hire, and grow the next generation of Googlers. We're so grateful to have him here today and to really understand a recruiter's point of view and what Google looks for in an applicant. And yeah, next we have Yakub. Yakub's a software engineer at google.org, which is an organization that supports nonprofits and social enterprises. They address social and environmental challenges in innovative ways. And he's currently supporting the Wadhwani Institute for Artificial Intelligence. And they were the winners of the Google AI Challenge. Starting from 2015 until just recently, he was a network and software engineer on the technical infrastructure team. And last but certainly not least, we have our very own UniMelb alumnus, Alex Johnson. She has been an intern at Google for the past 3 years prior to joining as a full-time software engineer at the beginning of this year. And she's on the ARCS team, which aims to create an open ecosystem for privacy-preserving AI-first computing. She completed a bachelor's degree in computing and software systems, along with a master's in computer science. And we also have Izzy in the call. She's a talent and outreach program specialist, and she really coordinated their part of the event. So we're really grateful for that. And all right, so just before we start and get into the main questions, we have a few questions just to break some of the ice. And the first question will be directed to Jackson. What have you been watching on Netflix recently?
Thanks, Calista. Thanks for the awesome introduction. And hello, everyone. Great to meet you all. So anyone that knows me knows that I like really trashy reality TV shows. So this definitely isn't a new show by any means, but my colleagues and my team got me into a show called Below Deck, which I think Izzy and I are both watching at the moment. Super good if you just want to unwind and not think about life. And essentially it's about people that work on luxury yachts that go around, and it's about like the super rich clients that they serve, who have some really interesting requests. And then it's also about like what goes on behind the scenes. So if you, like me, love trashy reality TV, I definitely recommend that one.
All right, great. I actually do love trashy reality TVs, and I haven't heard of that one, but I'll definitely check it out. All right, thank you, Jackson. And the next question will be for Alice. I'm quite interested to hear this answer because I personally have 4 puppies at home, so I'm a bit biased, but are you a cat person or a dog person?
Hello, Calista. I've had both cats and dogs when I was growing up, so I'd like to say both. But my cat did have a very dog-like personality, so possibly more of a dog person.
That's great. Yeah, I'm a bit scared of cats for some reason, but yeah. And lastly, Jakub, if you could choose anything in the world as your career apart from a software engineer, what would it be?
Good question. I was thinking on that question quite recently also, and I would probably say that if there is any way I could provide some meaningful contribution to sports, not maybe as a player, but I think it's too late for me, but as a coach or maybe some sort of support, or maybe as a spectator at least, that would be great. If they would pay me to be a spectator, I'm into it,
All right, that's awesome. It must be a very different job from a software engineer, but definitely interesting as well.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to get into the main questions for today. And yeah, just before I get to those questions. Yeah.
Calista, can you say something quickly?
Yeah, sure.
So hi, everyone. So excited for the event right now. If possible, it'd be great if you could turn on your cameras just because we can see you as well. We'd love to meet you. So yeah, if you're comfortable, would love to see you with your cameras on. If not, totally understand. That's it for me.
All right. Thank you so much, Izzy. Yeah. All right, so the first question would be, could you give us a brief insight to your role at Google? And I think we can start off with Jackson, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, I think you explained it so well before in terms of what I do, but in terms of what a day-to-day looks like for me, so I'm probably biased, but I think our team has the best job at Google. I'm sure Alice and Jacob may disagree. But essentially, we're responsible for all university engagement. So meeting with different universities and students around Australia and New Zealand, building relationships with university societies, such as this one as well, And then we also recruit for our intern and graduate roles at Google. And we do that on the tech side and the business side. So I mainly focus on tech-related roles, and I do most of the graduate hiring. And then over and above that, we also get to manage the intern program. So once we actually hire the interns to join at Google, and we have interns actually right now, we get to manage the program for them and make sure they have an awesome time with us. And then we also do, for those people that haven't got either an intern or graduate role, we get to do some upskilling and development programs as well. So we've got programs like Get Ahead, where we get to engage with students virtually, and we provide technical and soft skill building. So just a great way for you to connect with us at Google. And then hopefully one day, some of you may join as an intern or grad. But that's kind of, I guess, my role in a nutshell. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
All right, great. That sounds really interesting. And yeah, I would want to hear from Jakub and how you think whether your team is better than Jackson's or not.
Of course. Not that I'm biased, as everyone always, right? I think one of the very interesting things at Google is you can ask anyone in the office what do they work on, and I promise you need at least 1 hour before they fully explain you, and everyone is going to tell you my team is the best. So in my case, it is quite recently I've changed the team, but and the current role is being a software engineering in this institute in India called Vadwani, where we help Indian farmers building AI and machine learning platform to help their agriculture of cotton. Prior to that, I was a network engineer at Google, and I've been doing that for 5 years, including some time as an intern. So many people always think what exactly is a network engineer. And if you start to think that, oh, my NBN is not well performing, it's probably Jakub's fault. I bet you it's not my fault, because I had no idea what NBN was when I was applying to Google. And I have to say, if I would be in charge or had an option to work on that, I would do it slightly differently. But network engineering is, especially at Google, it's being able to provide this internet for YouTube, Google Cloud, Google Photos, and all the services, or for example, this call. So we are kind of using the internet, but also Google Cloud behind it. So I could say that I understand how exactly those packets flow, So that's my job in the nutshell.
All right, great. I guess we move on to Alice.
Yeah, I'm a software engineer at Google working on the ARCS team. And we are developing this framework that kind of redefines the way that users would interact with services in a privacy-preserving way. So we're ensuring that the user data is kept local to their devices. And the bulk of the work that I've done is in the storage area.
All right, thank you so much for your answers. It's really interesting to see different backgrounds and different roles in Google. Moving on to the next question, what does a typical workday or week look like for you? And I guess we can start off with Jakub.
A typical workday. If I would have to explain how today looks like for me, it's quite unusual, because I literally just started my work because I had half a day off. So you may think, oh my God, this guy starts at 5 p.m. Is it normal at Google? And I tell you it's not. Today it's quite a unique day. But I would say like the way how you work, as I give you an example of my team, but there is also a general answer. But in my team, because I'm the only person right now based in Sydney, and most of the team is like Tokyo, Singapore, and majority in India, I'm one of those, and the only one who's the furthest time zone. So I'll wake up in the morning and there's absolutely no one. It's like you can send a message and you get radio silence, nothing's happening. So I really have a chance to appreciate my mornings, and I can like wake up a little bit later and I can go for a run. So I normally start now somewhere around 10, 11. And my day kind of like picks up with interesting work somewhere around 2 p.m. when guys in Singapore wake up and when people in India wake up and messages keep on flowing. But I have this kind of disadvantage that they have the different time zone, but it's also a huge advantage because I have huge uninterrupted time in the morning if I really need to. And you have to use those disadvantages to be your huge advantages, because those people there are constantly interrupted, like message from that person, and I can literally log off at, let's say, 7 p.m. because I still want to be flexible for those people who want to work with me, and be enjoying my evening, right? And I have a chance to spend some time on learning in the morning, and I would say because of my location and being the only engineer in Sydney, it is kind of an individual kind of way of working, but still within Google you work as a team. So I would say 9 till noon, I'm individual, and noon onwards, I'm a team worker.
Awesome. I guess some of us can understand the struggle of time zone now that some of us are back in our home countries. But yeah, that's really good. Alice, how about you? How does a typical workday look like for you?
I'm also on a distributed team, but I work with others from the Sydney office as well as Seattle and San Francisco. So our time zone restrictions are the morning. So we usually spend the bulk of the mornings doing team meetings, things that involve the entire team. And then the afternoons we usually have to ourselves to do coding or code reviews, writing docs or reading docs. Yeah. And then Mondays are our super productive day because that's when the Americans are enjoying their Sunday.
All right, thank you so much for answering the question. And I guess we're moving on to, I guess, one of the questions that most of us have here. Jackson, what does a Google recruiter look for exactly in a suitable candidate?
Oh my gosh, how am I going to sum this up in a couple of minutes? There's obviously a lot of things that we look for, but in terms of if we're reviewing a CV, I'm going to speak about more so like the software engineering side of things, because I'm guessing that would probably be the most relevant role to a lot of folk here. Although every role would have different criteria and things that we'd look for. But generally for our software engineering roles, I kind of see it in 2 buckets. It's kind of like one side is the technical skills, and then the other side is more soft skills. So the technical skills, to be a software engineer at Google, we're looking for people who are strong coders and have a solid understanding of all the computer science fundamentals like algorithms and data structures. So either evidence of that through work experience, so that may be internships that you've done, or even through your studies as well. So that could be either personal project or university projects that you've done. So that's kind of the technical side of things. And I would say the technical bar is quite high at Google. And that's why in interviews, there will be a big focus on your ability to code well, as well as obviously your understanding of algorithms and data structures. But then on the non-technical side, we also love to see your soft skills as well. So in a lot of interviews, we're not always looking for the right solution. Whilst, of course, that's a bonus, we really want to see how you get there. So things like your problem-solving skills will be really important. So, if you're given a random problem on the job at Google, first of all, do stay calm. Obviously not panicking. Are you able to break down the problem step by step and kind of come up with a logical thought process? And then obviously the solution will be the last point. And then things like leadership as well. So we love seeing evidence of, now obviously for you all, you're studying, we're not expecting you to have managed, large teams before, but more just that you have leadership potential. So, what are some things that you do outside of your studies? So, it could be extracurricular, being part of, this developer group as well, or other societies at uni. These are all the things that we love to see. And it just shows your ability to be a leader, but also that you have passion outside of studies as well. So things like, whether you're part of open source communities or, are you active on your GitHub? or even just things that are completely random that have nothing to do with coding. They're things that we like to see as well, because we want to see what makes you you and what makes you a bit different from everyone else as well. That was like a 2-minute summary. I could probably talk for a lot longer, but hopefully that gives you some ideas, but happy to elaborate later on.
Yeah, thank you so much for the insight. I think it's, the summary was really good, and I'll definitely be keeping some of those points in mind, and we'll be asking more questions on that later on. But for now, I'll be passing the time to Stavia to ask some of the poll EV questions.
Thanks, Callista. Those were some really great questions and some really great answers from the panelists. So I will be sharing my screen. Let's see. So can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so this, I think Jackson can answer this question well. When will the STEP applications open for Google?
Great question. So all of our applications will open end of February. So generally we open our applications end of February, and then we go out on campus, or obviously next year it will be virtual engagement to promote our opportunities and meet with all the students. And then applications will normally close around mid-April. So you've kind of got from end of February to mid-April, and that's for all of our roles, so internships as well as graduate roles.
That was very informative. Thanks, Jackson. The second question, this is a great question, and this is my personal favorite. Is University of Melbourne a tech target school, or is there anything such as a tech target school or university for Google or any company as specific?
Yeah, happy to answer this one again. Yes, Uni of Melbourne is one of our top hiring universities, so definitely a tech target school, as you would call it. So we do have a list of these, and each year we obviously look closely at data around, obviously the degrees at the different universities, as well as performance and how many people have applied from the Uni of Melbourne before, how many people have we hired. And the good news is Uni of Melbourne pretty much always makes our top list. It's just good news for all of you.
That's great news. That's really reassuring, Jackson. I'll be handing it over to Arnav. We'll be coming back to the poll EV questions at the end of the questions. So over to you, Arnav.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Salvia. So this question is towards Jackson. So when applying for internships or jobs at Google, does the course marks or grades of a student affect the outcome of landing a position?
Yeah, great question, Arnav. I think this has changed a lot over the last few years, to be honest. Right now, I would say it matters somewhat, but definitely not the be-all or end-all. So when we look at a candidate, we're kind of looking at what we call a packet, which is the overall information on that candidate. So that will be like their resume, their work experience, their performance at university, which would include grades, as well as interviews and interview feedback. So the university grades is one data point that we look at to make our final decision on whether we would hire someone, but it's definitely not the be all or end all. And I definitely wouldn't worry, if you're not a perfect student and you don't have a perfect GPA, that's completely okay. You may be able to show, your abilities and skills through other ways, through your experiences, through your interview performance. So don't panic too much. Whilst we look at it, it's not kind of the final decision maker for us.
That is awesome. And on that note, students or graduates may not have prior experience in working with a company before applying for a technical position. So how could they make their resume stand out given they do not have previous experience working in a technical role?
Yeah, great question. I kind of touched on this before, but and again, having experience is great, but again, it's not a deal breaker if you don't have previous work experience, particularly if you're, a first or second year student and you're going for a STEP internship. We pretty much know that chances are you haven't had work experience before. So what I would say is try and demonstrate all the different skills and competencies that we look at through other means. So make sure on your resume that you write down any personal projects that you're working on, any university projects as well that you're particularly proud of, and be really clear about what skills that you obtained or that you were able to practice through those projects. Also, like anything outside of studies, so like extracurricular, involvement in societies, that kind of, again, shows your leadership skills, which we love to see. Again, like what are you doing outside of your studies to kind of demonstrate your passion for tech? So again, like, are you part of, open source communities? Have you taken part in coding competitions? If that's your thing, we love to see your GitHub profile as well. So make sure you link that on your CV, but also that you actually have, active open repositories on there, so we can kind of see some of the work that you've done and some of the technical skills that you've obtained. So I think there's definitely a lot of other ways to kind of show experience outside of work. And because we know that some students, they really want to focus on their studies, and so maybe they don't have time to commit to work as well. And that's completely okay. So yeah, there are just a few things that you can do.
That's awesome. And a question for Yakub. How important are projects that graduates or students work on as a part of their university course or outside the course in applying for a technical role at Google? And also, does one kind of project, either open source or personal projects, get prioritized over one another when being considered in an application?
Yeah, that's a nice question. So I will start with answering the second bit, which is whether personal or open source is more important. I would say I treat them equally. I'm always happy to see them. I, of course, like to see them. And what I find as the most important bit is if you decide to put it on your CV, and you happen to end up having an interview with me, be ready to be asked about it. And I'm gonna take my diligence before the interview to check what you did, and I'm gonna ask a high-level question, and I'm gonna ask a low-level question if I'm capable to understand the work you did. But I'm gonna verify that. And I'm often quite surprised when people put things, for example, put some technologies or skills they possess. Sometimes there are things I have no idea what they are because like we don't work with everything, right? And I ask, oh, can you tell me about this? And the fluency of the answer and the confidence that comes out of you will kind of give me an understanding, is this something you really did, or it's something you put in as a fill the gap kind of thing? And it is so much easier to notice if you really committed your time, let's say, into your personal project, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be 1 billion people app that you have on everywhere and everyone is using it. Even if it's like an app that makes your life easier, right? And the best customer and user is you, and even if it's just you, I still would love to hear it, because I would be able to see through your eyes, literally. Maybe now with video call it's going to be harder, but if it's in personal interview, I can see through your eyes the excitement of you telling me about this thing. And that definitely, for me, is like plus 1 point or even more, So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Also, for everyone here, the hiring process can seem overwhelming to both students and graduates. So when applying for a position at Google, what steps can students or graduates expect to take in the hiring process?
And is that question directed to me or to Jackson or Alice or?
Yes, anyone can start. So maybe Jackson, would you like to start?
Yes, Jackson, you go for it.
Sure. And yeah, feel free to jump in, because obviously Jacob and Alice would have gone through the process at one point, so they can probably share insights on what it was like for them. But I guess to give you a high-level overview, every role at Google will have a slightly different process. But for all of our student opportunities, which you can find on google.com/students, and then you can obviously filter by Australia, New Zealand opportunities. The first step is obviously the application. So that's the easy part. So there's an online application form. You'll attach your resume and your transcript. And with your transcript, just the most updated version is completely fine. The good news is every application that we get is reviewed by a person, not a robot. So we don't use our machine learning to go through CVs. Actually, someone will review every CV. And then if you make it through to the next stage, the next step is what we call our Google Online Challenge. Now, this is quite new, and it's only really last year was the first time we piloted this. But the Google Online Challenge is a way for us to assess your technical skills as well as problem-solving skills. So it's an online assessment which you sign up for in advance. It is optional, so it's not compulsory as part of the process, but we definitely recommend you doing the challenge because it's a good practice for interviews if you do get to that stage. And then after the Google Online Challenge, there's generally firstly a phone interview, which you'll have with an engineer. Again, this is the process for software engineers, so I'm being quite specific here. And that's an interview over the phone using a Google Doc for coding. And again, that's kind of assessing your coding ability. So you'll pick your strongest coding language, as well as your understanding of algorithms and data structures. If you do well in that first phone interview, you would then come to what we call the on-site interview stages, which used to be a full day of 5 interviews, which you come into the Google office. Even if you're outside of Sydney, we help you with travel arrangements to come to Sydney and meet some of the folk here and get to see the office. Now, obviously, in a COVID world, that looks quite different. So right now, all of our interviews are virtual. So the on-site interviews would be over Google Meets, so the platform that we're using now. And those 5 interviews, 4 of them would be similar to the phone, which would be really deep diving on your technical skills. And then the 5th one is what we call the Googliness leadership interview. And that's kind of focusing more on soft skills. So some of those leadership competencies, as well as culture fit. And that's kind of, I guess, more of a soft skill based interview as opposed to a coding interview. And then if you do well there, you'll go through a hiring committee review. And then if that goes well, then hopefully we could extend you an offer. That's for full-time graduate roles. Just to quickly touch on intern roles, internships, you obviously don't have to do as many interviews. So instead of doing 1 phone interview and 5 Google Meet interviews, you just have to do 2 phone interviews. So much less. And the phone interviews are, again, assessing similar competencies around your technical skills. Sorry, that was a lot of information, so I might stop there. But hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, that's totally fine. It's very informative and really good to know essentially what to expect when going through the process. And now a question for Alice. What do you like the most about working with Google?
I really enjoy working with my team and the people that I work with. I think I'm very lucky to be surrounded by very supportive senior engineers that are willing to guide me. And there's just a lot of opportunities for me to develop my skills and grow as a software engineer in the role that I have at the moment. So yeah, it's
awesome. Can you share any cool projects that you have been working on currently or that you have done outside of Google?
Yeah, I don't think I can share the things that I'm currently working on, but I can share what I did for my master's thesis. Some of you may know my supervisors, Tim Miller and Ronald Singh. Tim is he lectures half of the AI in autonomy subject, which is a really fun and interesting subject. So I recommend it if you have that opportunity. Anyways, I worked with Tim and Ronald using eye tracking technology to detect when an individual is surprised, particularly when interacting with an autonomous agent. And this was a really good experience. I learned a lot about how research is conducted, and I read what felt like 100 or hundreds of papers on eye tracking or autonomous agents, even psychology, because I had to involve like surprise and expectation violation. yeah, I did a lot of experiment design and data wrangling. I got to use the university resources like the design labs and the eye tracking technology. And as part of my experiment, I developed a game. So yeah, it was a really well-rounded project that I'm grateful for.
They all sound really cool. I do have a question for Jackson. So what role does a referral play in the application process? And how important is it to have a referral in advancing through the interview process? In addition to this, do you have any advice for students and graduates about asking for a referral?
Yeah, great question. Again, I think this has changed. Another thing that's kind of changed over the years from when I first joined to now. I would say generally having a referral is always a positive thing, because if you have, a Googler who's, been at the business, who can kind of, I guess, confirm and validate yourself and your work ethic and your skills. So someone that's either worked with you before, studied with you, maybe they've been your lecturer at university, that always holds weight, and it is an additional data point that we can use when making a hiring decision. But we also realize that not everyone necessarily knows a Googler, and that's completely okay. There's no advantage of, when I say it's like a nice to have, I would never say that if you didn't have a referral, then that would jeopardize your opportunity to do well in the process. So it's a nice to have. If you have it, great. Let your recruiter know, or get the person to actually refer you in the system. But if not, don't panic. That's completely okay. We have had students in the past that when we go out on campus and do events, we have engineers that come along, and during the networking session at the end, they kind of ask them, hey, can you be my referrer? Can you refer me to Google? Every engineer probably has a different perspective. Some are super happy to do that. Others, not so much. My personal take on it is a referral is great, but if it's someone that you don't really know, if it's just someone that you've randomly met at a networking event, it's obviously not going to hold as much weight as someone who's actually worked with you before or studied with you, who's seen your work. So that's kind of my take on it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just a question for Yakub. Competitive programming is a fun and rewarding way of improving your programming, algorithmic design, and debugging skills through solving a variety of problems within a limited time frame. So is competitive programming or any such competition an important factor that is considered when applying for a position at Google?
I believe not, because I've never done that. And I'm here on the Google side. To be honest, and probably Alice will be able to answer this question also, because maybe she did. But in my case, I have never done this sort of events. And I've knew people who've done those events. Probably I also know you, because some of you may do those events. I never personally found them that interesting to me. I love solving problems, and I understand the importance of having time constraint and being pushed to the limits, but I've never found them as particularly interesting. Maybe also I was not at my university, I was not proficient in coding, so I have to say I did mostly like telecommunication stuff, and my degree was kind of not well aligned with data structures and algorithmics work. So I saw those exercises and I was like, yeah, right. How do I even tackle that, right? So maybe that's why I never liked it, because I didn't know how to solve it. Today I look at those, and when I look at the candidates doing those, I think if you put that I would say from the hiring perspective, if someone puts it into a CV that they did competitive programming, and I ask you a question on the interview, I think the biggest difference I've noticed between people who did those things and people who didn't is people who did them, they just jump straight into writing code. They don't explain what they do, and they just assume that's the way to go. And yes, like Jackson mentioned, having a problem solved is one thing of an interview, but being able to explain me your thought process, it's far more important. And too often people get too fixated to just get the problem solved. And maybe if you do those competitions in pairs or in groups where you have to kind of share your thinking, that could be a bit more beneficial on this interview side. But for sure, you can easily see that people who did those sort of events are far more capable to cope with stress on the interview, right? Because it's like, okay, I mean, not that they don't stress. Everyone stresses. Even I do sometimes when I ask a question. I'm like, oh, is this not going to overwhelm a candidate? But from the candidate perspective, I kind of can easily see also your stress level, and that kind of gives a gauge. But maybe Alice, did you do any of those competitive programming events?
I was a little bit involved in the competitive programming club at the University of Melbourne. I attended those. We had like weekly sessions where we're learning new tools to tackle these kind of problems, and those were always interesting to me. And I did the Anzac rounds, which are kind of more for fun. They're less competitive. I just didn't like the amount of pressure, the time constraint, and writing code that would as quick as you can, which sometimes ends up being like very unelegant. So, but I think like showing that you're involved in university clubs like that is a good thing to put on your CV.
Yeah, awesome. Do I have one last question? I'll ask Alice first. What do you like the most about working at Google? I mean, sorry. What are your top 3 tips for getting through an interview at Google?
I always, the biggest thing I had to overcome was nerves. I was always nervous in an interview setting. So my hot tip is to do plenty of mock interviews. And in particular, try to do a mock interview with someone where the interviewer is someone that you don't know very well. I think that kind of puts you more on in the spot and gets you practicing that a bit more. And then some other interview tips, maybe know that the interviewer is working with you, so listen to any pointers that they're sharing or questions that they ask. And the last thing I might add is to practice communicating clearly. So remember to clarify the problem or run through examples.
Awesome. Jackson, do you have any tips for getting through an interview at Google?
Gosh, I need to think of other ones now. Alice stole mine. No, what Alice said is spot on. I definitely echo those 3 points. And yeah, just to reiterate on the communication piece, and Jakub mentioned this before, but the solution is, and the final solution is only one piece of the puzzle. And what Google has loved is someone that can really communicate well. I would say my tip would be over communicate. So like, even if you're kind of going through like a brainstorming kind of phase in your head and you don't want the interviewer to know what you're thinking and you want it to come out, I guess, more polished, don't do that. Like, we love to hear you brainstorm, to gather thoughts, to question, initial thoughts and assumptions, and really be able to over communicate and really talk through the problem as you're solving it, would be my tip. The second one would be just enjoy it as well. I know that sounds super lame, but candidates always say that they love Google interviews. Generally, the interviewers are super nice. The interview's more of a conversation as opposed to like, here's a technical examination, I'm just going to stare at you while you answer my questions. And as Alice mentioned, like, the interviewers really are there to help you, because they want to see, like, if this was a problem that they were working with this candidate on in the real world at Google, is this someone that they would want to work with? Is this someone that's a team player that communicates well, that's logical as well? So that would be my, I guess, tips.
Awesome. And I know a lot has been covered, but Jakub, do you have any other tips?
Yeah, I think I might have the hardest job because I have to choose 3 things that you didn't mention. I would say the tip number 1 would be, if you want to do interviews at Google, you have to apply. I think very big amount of people forget, I have so many friends who always say, oh, I would love to work at Google, I would love to get to Google, and they don't prepare and they don't apply. So it's very difficult because if you don't show yourself and don't apply, it's extremely difficult. Maybe you work for a company that gets acquired. That's one option. Maybe you are that good that we're going to reach out to you and give you the work. That's option 2. And option 3 is like probably all 4 of us from Google here, we just applied. So tip number 1 is to apply. When I think about tip number 2, I would say this communication that was so many times already emphasized. And yes, being able to kind of give me the dump of your thinking, because we have to transcribe interviews. We are writing down nearly every single word of yours, and we kind of create those notes at the end. And it is important to be aware that there are no stupid questions on the interview, and it may happen that you don't know things. And don't be surprised because I don't know some things neither. None of us are experts in everything. So I'm here to emphasize and find the things that you are very good at. I'm an interviewer, for example, who does not focus on stuff you don't know, because what's the point? Like, if you really want to focus on things I don't know, it's fairly easy. There is a lot of things I don't know, but like, what you're gonna get out of that interview at the end, right? And the point number 3 is probably to kind of trying to cope with the stress and be able to kind of roll with it. I mean, it is going to be there, and this small amount of stress is beneficial. But if you put yourself through this kind of a feedback loop that, oh, I'm not doing well, or maybe the first interview out of 5 didn't go well, and you feel it, it doesn't mean that you didn't get a job. It means you just maybe didn't get it 100% right. And every interview is a little bit of a gamble, because you can get a question that you've never knew how to tackle, or maybe you just hit some blocker that you just didn't know how to approach it. But don't put yourself down if, for example, the first interview out of 5 went wrong. It means nothing. I mean, if 4 out of 5 went really bad, that probably it's going to be hard, but like, stay positive, right? But because there's another thing that I would quickly touch on is the question, for example, I ask, they don't have an end. Like, you finish and I give you another constraint. And if you finish, I give you another constraint. And you may be thinking, oh, I didn't finish the exercise and I didn't complete it, so it means I failed. No, because in my case, if you get to a certain point, you already pass. From that point, you're just gonna get more points. So you will never finish it, so don't get unhappy. But you should always stay and look on the positive sides of the interview. At the end, if it doesn't work, unfortunately, it's a lesson learned, and you can reapply it next time for Google or for a different company, but learn with the process.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. And now I will pass it on to Stavia, who will go over the last set of questions on the poll.
Thanks, Ardav. I'll be sharing my screen again. Just let me know when you can see it. Is it visible?
Yeah.
All right. So the first question is quite long. What skills or characteristics make someone effective as a remote worker? I think Jakub and Alice can answer this question.
Alice, go ahead. I take question 2.
Alrighty. I think something that I've noticed working remotely is there's more of a barrier to reach out for help now. Before, I used to kind of, if I ever needed to ask a coworker a question, I would kind of just like look over and make eye contact and ask them to come over and give me a hand if they're free. But now I've had to develop a relationship where I could, with my coworkers, where I could ping them on chat or maybe email them or set up a time to have a meeting, and making sure feeling comfortable to do that was something that I had to overcome a bit, because I started my new job, I think in February, and then we started work from home in March. So I didn't really have a opportunity to build those relationships before we got remote, before we started working remotely. So yeah, one of the most effective things to do is keeping those communication channels open.
Yes. Jakub, would you like to step in for the second question?
Yeah, I also will answer the first. I didn't know, Alice, that you joined in Feb. That's kind of interesting to join during like a pandemic. Yeah, I think also to effective remote worker, I would put a big plus one into what you said, Alice, that it's like, I think we took it for granted to just look around and ask someone, and didn't really put sometimes maybe enough effort to really first try to look through yourself, because the answer is just the desk next to you sometimes, and it's literally 1 minute away from you. But you have to spend some time and dig through some documentation that like can be outdated, and sometimes it's a pain. But I wish you could ask sometimes so easily, but maybe soon. Question 2. Seems like I'm Polish. Yes, I am from Poland. My degree. I think you know what is. I don't know who asked this question directly, but what I found the most challenging is everyone says like, "Oh, my GPA was, let's say, X," and I'm like, I have no idea, because we have no concept of GPAs. And so, what do I put into my CV? Do I make up a number? So I remember I did some weird average of things, and I realized it has to be not higher than 5. So I just put 4 point something, and it seems to work. I also would say that I've noticed that there is a huge way of teaching difference between Australia and Europe, and I did my bachelor's partially in RMIT for a year, and which was one of maybe the reasons why I'm also in Australia. But I noticed that it's far more emphasized into a little bit more group work, and where I feel European universities, or maybe like East European universities, like they just cultivate this kind of rock star method that one person is just literally so good that smashes everything, and group work is not required, and probably that doesn't help in your work later on, because it's all about the team. And quickly, what is important on the CV, I think just be proud which uni you finished, and make sure that you translated your degree correctly, because I think that's the biggest challenge. And I think, I know how in Slovakia, but in Poland, like people don't, at university, people don't speak English much. So knowing my official title of my degree in English took a while, because I didn't want to keep changing my CV, you know. That's my quick advice.
That's great. That's good to hear your experience, Jakub. I think this question is for Izzy and Jackson. Quite curious, where did you get the Gpa t-shirts from? They look really good.
Well, I'm happy you noticed. No kidding. I put it on just for you. Where is it from, Jax? The engineers had it.
Look, there's so many. Like, I literally have 20 Google t-shirts. So I guess the best way to get one is just to work at Google. And there's always some sort of giveaway whenever we do events. I can't remember specifically the Good Day one, but I've had it for a couple of years. So yeah, I don't really know where that was. Probably just an event we did.
No, I think the good day,
guys,
I think the good day T-shirt comes when you start. When you join the Google office in Australia, you get it. I recall.
I did not get one.
Oh, we have
I
to
didn't get one. I just have to mail. You have to mail like goodday.google.com. And
Alrighty, I'll get onto it.
now we have action items.
We are very jealous of you, Jackson. You have 20 t-shirts of Google. We are very jealous. Okay, I'll go to next question. What is the interview process for UX UI application designer? I think this is an open question.
Look, I actually have not. I did UX hiring like a couple of years ago. We haven't done it recently, at least on like the graduate side. So I really, like off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. Most interview processes at Google are quite similar. Obviously, when you're going for a UX role, we're not necessarily testing coding ability. We're looking more at the design skills. In terms of like the format of interviews, it's still similar. Like you generally have, it could be anywhere between 3 to 5 Google Meet interviews with different, I guess, people, so different UX managers or frontline staff in the business. In terms of the specifics of the interview, I might have to pass on this question. I don't really know. I don't know if Jakub or Alice knows.
I haven't had a chance to work with UX or URs. So
yeah, sorry. But all I would say is definitely when you do your job search on google.com/students, you can obviously search UX as the code word, and then it'll kind of bring up the different intern and graduate opportunities in that world. As I said, in Sydney this year, we don't have any opportunities. We have hired UX interns and grads in the past though, but you can also look at other locations, pretty much globally at Google. And what I would say is like when you apply, you'll be connected with a recruiter, and then they'll be kind of the subject matter expert who can answer any questions you have on specifics.
Great answer, Jackson. This is for this question really relates to business students. What are the internship opportunities for business side at Google, and can computing majors apply for that?
Yeah, so stretching me again, not my area of expertise, but I can answer. So on the business side, our general internship and grad opportunities are sales, account management related. Occasionally we'll have like a marketing internship or graduate role as well. So you'd either be working in our small to medium business sales team, working on AdWords technology and selling that to small, medium businesses. We've also recently had some new opportunities in our Google Cloud business as well, for both interns and graduates. So those roles are more customer engineering based. So that's kind of more like a pre-sales technical role. So I would say anyone can apply. Obviously for these business roles, we are looking for customer-facing experience, or at least a passion for relationship management, and understanding of things like sales cycles. So, I mean, we have had people, doing technical degrees that have applied before, but you would need to show some sort of evidence of, customer-facing interaction, account management, relationship building, and kind of basic sales skills as well. Hopefully that answers that question.
Great answer, Jackson. Another question is, what is the best way to reach out and recruiter? Is LinkedIn a better way, or like sending up a cold email? I think this really resonates with a lot of our students. So
yeah, look, I think every recruiter would give you a different answer. So I'll share my perspective. I'm terrible at LinkedIn administration. So whilst if you send me a request, I will connect with you. If you're messaging me on LinkedIn, like I have been quite bad at, just because of the volume of random messages I get. So it's not, for me personally, that's probably not the best way to connect with me. I know other recruiters are probably more on the ball than me when it comes to managing their LinkedIn. But again, I think just the sheer volume of interest that we get, it's kind of hard to reply to everyone. I think applying online, I know it kind of sounds like the token answer, but I think applying through our careers website is really the best way, because it guarantees that a recruiter will review your CV. My other piece of advice here as well is come to these events. So the fact that you're all here is great. Come to our campus events that we do as well. Connect with Google recruiters that way. There's plenty of networking opportunities throughout the year. And for me, I always remember a face or someone that I've spoken to at university over, checking a LinkedIn email. But again, every recruiter is different. Izzy, I don't know if you have a different perspective, but that's my view.
I think my thoughts are, so with LinkedIn, the thing that I find is really helpful, if you do add someone, like adding a little message on like a little intro to who you are is really helpful, because we meet so many students, but like we don't memorize first or last names. So if someone messaged me and said, "Hi Izzy, I'm Sue. I went to the DSC event yesterday. It was great. I learned XYZ. Would be great to connect with you here on LinkedIn. Cheers." Whoever. Like that's how you kind of like get to that first step of like just connecting. I've had people like connect with me and in their intro say, "What job would I be good for?" And I'm like, "Who are you? Chill out." So I think it's just getting that like first kind of connection. And from there, like at least that opens the door to chatting later. But as Jackson said, we review all the applications that come through. So that would be kind of like your resume will be reviewed if you apply. So that's kind of like the surefire way. But attending events like this, getting to know us, chatting to us through here is like a great first step.
I would also iterate on Izzy's comment. And in old days, like 1 year ago when COVID didn't exist, and you go for a conference and you give your like a business card. Just giving a business card is like, okay, I will forget in 5 minutes who you were. But if you kind of personalize this business card, saying like your name in the back or something, it's so much easier to kind of do this mapping to a person's face or the situation. So it's same, like, I don't know how you guys, Jackson and Izzy, what's the volume of stuff you get on LinkedIn, but so often on LinkedIn you get so many random things. And it's hard to assess whether that person you really met, or did you even speak with that person, or there was some virtual event, or it's some just random person based in a place of the world that you even don't know that exists, trying to connect to you and tells you, "Hire me." And you're like, okay. So it's like, I think getting a personal message, who are you and how we met, it's always super helpful.
Agree. And some people manage to find my email address and they do like just send me like a cold email, which I always find a little bit creepy. No offense if anyone's done that to a recruiter before, it's all good. But I think like some people work out like what the formula of like a Google email is, or maybe they just try their luck at, sending an email to me, and sometimes I do get them. But again, like as Jakob and Izzy said, with no context, just a random email asking for a job or asking what job you'd be good for, that's kind of not my job. Your job is to find out what you're passionate about, do your research about roles that you think would be a good fit, and then apply. So yeah.
Thank you, everyone. They were great answers. In the interest of time, I will be asking, this will be the last question. So would you recommend putting participation in competitions such as Google Code Jam or any hackathon on a resume or CV? Just the participation, even if you haven't won anything?
Yeah, definitely. We love that kind of stuff. So definitely include that. Any kind of competitive programming or competition that you've done is nice to see on the CV, but when it's like a Google program, obviously that's even better, because we know that you love Google, that you've tried one of our competitions. If you have got a place in that, like great to put, like you may say came third place out of 1,000 people or whatever it may be. But if you don't, that's okay. We never really compare people based on their rank. Just the fact that you've kind of gone out of your way, spent time to do something outside of your core studies, like a competition, and that's great. But as Jakob said, like if coding, competitions aren't your thing, or competitive programming is not your vibe, that's okay. Like there's definitely other ways you can showcase, your passion for tech. But yeah, I would say if you have done that stuff, definitely include it.
Thank you so much, Jackson. It would be great. I would love Jackson to give some resume tips if you could maybe give us students how to send what kind of a resume students should be going to Google to get selected. If Jackson can give some tips, that would be great.
Before Jackson gives tips, let's do our photo. Is everyone cool? Because I know he wants to put slides and stuff. So let's do it. We'll take two. So this one, like, let's just just be normal. Okay. Ready? 3, 2, 1, smile. Cool. And then we'll take one more. We'll do like a thumbs up. Is that cool? Ready? 1, 2, 3, smile. Yay. Very good. Thank you. Sorry, Jax.
No, like order priority, photo first.
Photo first, then resume.
Yeah. Cool. Let me present my screen. I've just put a few slides together. I'll try and get through this quite quickly because then I know that to finish off, we'll also be looking at some example resumes, and Jakub and I can kind of help, share some feedback on what's good and what can be improved. So for this part, I'll probably just take 10 minutes. Cool. Can everyone see my screen? I can't hear. Can someone just say yes?
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
Cool. Sorry, I'm looking at my presentation, so I can't actually see anyone at the moment. But cool. Before I get started, though, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're all meeting. So for me, I'm based in Sydney. So the traditional custodians here are the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I want to recognise their cultures and continuing connection to land, waters and community, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging as well. Awesome. So I have an agenda, but I'm going to just skip through because I think the content's probably more important than the agenda itself. So some general resume tips. So some of these tips are going to sound quite obvious, but you'd be surprised that sometimes it's not always as obvious as you would think. So my first tip would be PDF format is always a good way to go. Sometimes, people spend ages, making the perfect resume. And then when they upload it, when they apply online, for whatever reason, the formatting gets a bit funky. And sometimes we can't actually read the resumes, which is a huge shame. So definitely make sure that you upload your resume in PDF format. It's just the most compatible and the easiest for us to read. Less is definitely more. So please keep it clean, simple. Bullet points are great. Before we've had applications that are like 20 pages long, CVs that are 20 pages long. I've had one that had like a table of contents. Again, just with the sheer volume of applications that we do receive, please try to keep it to 1 or maximum 2 pages. If that means like if you essentially keep it to 1 page, but that means that it's in like size 8 font and everything's squished together, then probably not the best for the recruiter trying to review it. So again, would rather you go over and maybe have a 2-page resume that's really easy to read with bigger font and lots of bullet points are always good.
Jackson, I ask you a question.
Yes.
I'm interested. Maybe. Would you say you tailor a CV per job or you use one CV for multiple jobs?
Great question. Now, I would say like definitely have your kind of stock standard CV, right? But you really, in my opinion, you should be tweaking it to the job that you're going for. And that kind of, I guess, links to my next point. So as a recruiter, I really like to see when it's clear that the candidate's actually reviewed the job description for the role that they've gone for, particularly like the responsibilities and the minimum qualifications as well. And they've kind of linked those minimum qualifications and responsibilities directly to their resume. Sometimes we get people that do resumes and cover letters and they forget to, so they've obviously just done one and sent it out to like 20 companies and they say, "Dear Microsoft recruiter." So probably not the best look, but I guess to answer your question, where you can, try to tailor it for the role that you're going for. Obviously, there's going to be things that will be consistent no matter what you apply for, like your degree, your study, your work experience, but where you can link it to the role, that's always good. Awesome. And then when you're going for obviously a software engineering role at Google or other companies, definitely call out your coding experience. So, we want to see what your strongest coding languages are, but not just listing them. Sometimes people think that by listing like 10 coding languages, it makes them look better or smarter. But if you list 10 coding languages on your resume, I guess to Jakob's point before, if you then can't back that up with actually being able to code or answer questions in those languages, then you're not really setting yourself up for success. We'd rather you just have 1 to 2 coding languages that you're strong in, because that's the coding language that you'll use when you actually do interviews. And then also calling out any kind of computer science fundamentals knowledge that you have or that you've done in your coursework. So things like data structures, algorithms, definitely call that out. My next tip would be, rather than just listing, say you did a internship at Microsoft, rather than just listing or just copy pasting the job description and listing your 10 responsibilities, we really want to see the impact that you've had. So using action words, including metrics, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later on as well, in a bit more detail. And then super basic contact information. Again, it sounds not super obvious, but sometimes we get people that apply that don't put their email address or phone number, which makes it quite difficult for us to reach out to set up interviews and next steps. And then the final thing here would be, obviously, you have limited real estate on your resume, so you don't need to use up, half a page listing all of your references and their contact details. That's something that if we need it, we can ask you for later. So it's fine just to put, references available on request. And that will save you a lot of space on your resume. Awesome. So resume structure. Now, again, your resume may look slightly different, but this is just, a structure that we use at Google. So always have your education at the top of your resume, then followed by relevant work experience, then followed by projects. So that could be, academic or personal projects. They're kind of like I would say the must-haves. And then number 4 and number 5 are like the nice-to-have. So if you have done any co-curricular activities outside of your studies where you've demonstrated leadership, or, again, like if you've done competitive programming, or you've, written a research paper, or you've got honors or awards, like they're all nice-to-haves. If you don't have that, it doesn't mean that you won't get a shot at Google. But if you do have those things, you can include them, but maybe further down on your resume. So education should really be, top of mind and easy for us to see. So on that note, education. So the reason why it should be the first section of your resume, if you think about it, a Google recruiter any season may have anywhere up to like a few thousand applications. And whilst a recruiter will review every resume, chances are they're probably not spending 5 minutes reviewing a resume. So things that should be really obvious is your education. So obviously listing your degree, the university that you studied at, but most importantly, please clearly list your graduation month and year. And when I say graduation, I don't mean like when your graduation ceremony is, but when you're, expected to finish your studies. So, that could be December, November, December, or if it's a mid-year graduate, could be June, July. The reason why we want to have your graduation month and year is because that will essentially you're just making our jobs easier, because we know that you're eligible for the role that you applied for. So, if you're graduating in 2023, but you're going for a graduate role this year, obviously you wouldn't be eligible. So then we may filter your application towards, potentially an internship instead. Do list your GPA on there. Don't panic if it's not amazing. As I said, it is only one data point that we look at. But more importantly, do list any relevant coursework that you've done, as well as technical skills that you've obtained. So this is where you'll list your coding languages and any other technical skills that might be relevant for that role. So this is kind of an example of what it might look like on a resume. So you've got your university name, you've got the type of degree that you've done, intended graduation date and GPA, and then underneath that's where you put relevant coursework as well as technical skills. I know I'm moving quite fast. I am just conscious of time, so I might just keep going through, and then any questions that you have, we can answer at the end. All right, work experience. Now, again, this is only if you have work experience. If you don't panic, but you just need to beef up your resume with with other evidence through your studies, through extracurricular. If you do have work experience, again, make sure you list the employer, the position, the dates that you were employed as well. So the starting month and year and the end month and year. And again, like have maybe 2 to 4 bullet points for each work experience that you've had. Keep it really clear and concise, and only include relevant work experience. So, you know, if you're going for a software engineer role at Google, if you worked at McDonald's back in high school, that's awesome. I personally worked at Macca's, so I definitely am a fan of people that have worked there. But again, probably not relevant for the role. So really no need for that to use up, you know, real estate on your resume. Only include experience that is relevant to the role that you're going for. And then the big piece here is impact, impact, impact. So again, like if you're doing a software engineering internship with Atlassian, we've probably got a good idea of some of the stuff that you were doing as a software engineering intern. But what we don't know is like what impact you had in that internship. So again, like what project did you do and what were you able to accomplish? And this is where you use data points as well. So any kind of data points that you can include to show impact will be really important. So a good formula is like accomplish X as measured by Y by doing Z. So this is an example of what work experience could look like on your resume. So again, what did you achieve? You deployed the company's new and improved in-house account reconciliation system. And then again, what technical competencies did you learn throughout this project and what coding languages did you use? Cool. So this is kind of an example. I think that one was like the one that is not as good. And then this one is better because again, they've used impact here. So deployed a new in-house account reconciliation system using Python. And as a result, the impact here was they improved latency by 12%. So that's a much better way of writing it to the previous slide. Projects, I kind of talked about this before. So any course projects that you've done, if it was like a group work assignment that you did in university, kind of also state like what your role within the group was. And as Jakub said before, like don't oversell. So because if you get an interviewer like Jakub who will actually ask you about the project at a high level, you know, if you actually weren't an active participant within the group, but you've said that you achieved all these things by yourself, then that kind of doesn't add up. So obviously only put down what your contribution was. And then personal projects, it really doesn't matter what your project is. Like it could be anything random. As long as it kind of shows your passion for tech, then that's all we really care about. And sometimes the interviewers may be familiar with that kind of project. They may ask you questions. Sometimes they may have no idea what you've done, but they're just curious. So again, like any personal projects that you list, be able to talk about them as well in an interview scenario. Cool, I'm just gonna keep moving through. So then activities leadership. So yeah, what excites you? What sets you apart and what makes you you? Obviously at Google, diversity is super important for us. So we're not gonna hire, you know, only A-grade students from the University of Sydney doing computer science who all did competitive programming and we're all part of the same society. Like we want to see diversity of thought, of perspective. So whatever makes you you, like definitely tell your story through your resume. So like be proud of extracurricular that you've done, any clubs or organizations that you've been a part of. Again, like if you have done like competitive programming, definitely let us know. If you've done any like developmental programs, for example, like if you took part in Google's Get Ahead program, that's music to our ears. We love to see that because it means that you've committed to developing your skills outside of your studies. And a lot of the time, you know, those programs happen in university holidays. So the fact that you've used your holiday time, you know, to develop yourself always looks great to a recruiter. And then honors and awards. If you have them, great. If you don't, that's fine. I never won any. Did I win? No, I didn't win any honors or awards at university, and I still ended up at Google. So if you have won an awards, again, be proud of it. Let us know. But if you haven't, don't panic and put things in there if you haven't actually won them, or stress out and be like, oh, I need to win an award. How am I going to do it? Again, it's a nice to have, but it's definitely not a must have. But any like publications that you may have done or presentations that you've facilitated, any like speaking engagements, maybe at your university that you've done, you know, that all tells us more about who you are. So like definitely include that if you have it. Cool. I'm gonna stop there because the next few slides are quite repetitive. But hopefully that's given you some idea of some of my top resume tips. But I might pause there, and then I guess, do we want to review the 2 resumes as well, Stavia?
I think it's fine. We are already over time, so we should be closing up. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alice, Jackson, and Yakub, for answering the question. It was really great experience, great learning experience for all of us. Thank you, Izzy, for organizing this event. It was really great to have you here. Also, guys, look out for Google Solution Challenge. It's coming out soon, along with our own DSC project series. The links are in the chat below. And stay tuned for more of our events. Follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Discord. We should be closing now. Till then, peace.